this video I'm going to show you how to treat wrist pain. So sometimes you get a pinch on the back of your wrist when you're pushing yourself into a press-up position. Commonly this is on the dominant hand. For me I'm right-handed. And I have a tightness in this wrist. I have tightness in the fingers. For example, I can bend my fingers on this hand, where you see it here, I can bend them up to 90 degrees, no problems. And this hand, they don't bend quite that far, 45 degrees. So I know that the fascia through the front line here is tight. So if this, as we stretch this way, we stretch this fascia, we're also going to, by the mechanics, the way the mechanics of the wrist are set up, we're going to actually put more pressure into the wrist joint. So what do we need to do to stretch out this front line to release off these pinches? So the first thing is to go through a wrist matrix, and I have this elsewhere on the video. So it's stretching forwards like this and moving the elbows, right? And you might notice a difference, like this elbow on me works really nicely. This elbow moving in and out doesn't work so nicely. So we've got to make sure it's not the shoulder joint, but I actually feel it down in the wrist joint. And if I take this hand, I can actually enhance the internal and external rotation, getting a better stretch into some of the muscles of the wrist. So this could be painful for you, right? So the next thing is to actually turn the wrists outwards like this and do the same movements, okay? Start with rotation of the elbows and then go left and right. And so as we're going into this area here, I begin to feel a little pinch like this. So this isn't quite right for me either. So then the last movement is actually bringing the fingers to point towards you, towards your knees. Now this, for me, helps just a little bit with that wrist pain, and I can start to feel a good stretch in here. Now from here, I can try and drive my elbows in and out a little bit. Doesn't work so much. So actually what I do is I move the body left and right like this. And that really gets this nice stretch through here. However, I want to introduce you to some tools to help with this. So I've got a nice thick rubber band here, and what I do is I put the rubber band around my back foot like this, and I hook it around my wrist. Now as I push backwards, you can see that with my foot, I'm getting a traction onto my wrist, and this is pulling the two bones of the forearm backwards, articulating through the wrist joint here. So now I can come over this wrist joint more without actually getting the pinch. So from the side, it looks like this. I'm getting a really nice stretch into my forearm here. Now, with your dominant hand, or with a hand that's got wrist pain, sometimes these carpal bones don't move as well. You've got the carpals and the metacarpals. So it's the metacarpals, as they attach into this distal row of carpal bones, they can get a bit stuck. So you take your other hand, you place it on top, and you actually slowly push down the little arch that's in those metacarpal bones. And now I can get more and more over my wrist joint. So I've got the traction here, try and get this down as close to the joint line as possible. And I've got a little bit of manual help through here. The last thing we can add on now is I'm pushing down this arch. I can actually pull upwards with my shoulder, getting traction here. So I'm fixing my hand down. Now, and you can't see it because I'm really moving anyway, but I pull this arm upwards like this. So I'm pulling my arm upwards. And I'm tractioning. Now I've got a really nice release, and I can move this into a circle and really feel little clicks and pops as my wrist opens up. Okay, so there's some really nice movements with the band, but also we've got a whole bunch of different tendons that cross this wrist joint, and sometimes one tendon can be more the tendon's not going to be tight so much, but the muscle can be tight, affecting that tendon. So common ones are in the thumb. So what I like to do is take a ball, place the ball underneath my thumb, and then get a stretch that isolates the thumb more than the rest of the wrist, but it's still stretching the wrist. So from the side, it looks like this. So this, I'm getting these really good pollicis muscles stretched out, and I find that that really helps. But what you might find is actually one individual finger is the key to releasing that wrist pain. So go through each of your fingers with a little ball underneath your finger, put that wrist stretch on, and just see, is there one that when you stretch it, it releases off the wrist. Now I'm doing that fast. You would hold one and you go forwards and backwards. Do the elbow internal external rotation as well as you do this. Then once we've got this, the front line here loosened up, we also need to think about the back line. And so this one's a little bit easier. You're going to go onto the back of your wrist here, put a little bit of weight onto it. Now generally most people find this painful. Just the way it is. We don't stretch the back of our wrist very much. And from here you can go more into the stretch, out of the stretch, or you can do the elbow trick as well, just going in and out with the elbow, or like put my elbow pit pointing this way and then drive into the stretch, or put my elbow pit pointing the same way as my fingers. It's a different stretch, okay? So you both need to do both of those. Then we can work on placing the thumb inside the hand and crunching that hand up. So really getting that hand to be nice and crunched. Elbow straight as much as you can. That in itself is going to be a huge stretch for some people. All right, so if you can get your elbow straight here, I mean, I do know people that end up in this position. So the first thing to do is try and get your elbow straight. Once your elbow is straight, work on making a fist of that hand whilst keeping the back of the hand on the ground, okay, and keeping the elbow straight. And then work in and out of those tight areas. You can see I just do these little like massagey type movements, going in and out, in and out. And so that's a way to loosen up your wrist, open up the fascia through those forearms and into the hand, and get this elbow joint moving. But one last thing, the test I showed you at the beginning wasn't for the wrist joint. You see my wrist is straight here, it's for the finger joints. And this side is not as good. So if you imagine you've got the palm fascia here is actually tight, that's going to spread up into the forearm. And so we want to do another stretch just into the fingers. And so the way to do that is to drive down the base of this carpal bone here and then work left and right whilst keeping, trying to shift the weight onto this bone, this bone, this bone, this bone, these knuckle joints. All right, so you're individually stretching out each one of those. And one way that I've found, just for me, that works really well, is when I'm in a downward dog type position, I take this hand, place it in between my legs, basically underneath my pelvis, and then from here I bend my knees, and then I get a really good stretch into those joints. So I'll show you from the side. So I'm into a downward dog type position. Hand goes down, then as I bend my knees, my elbow comes towards my knees, and I'm keeping the weight onto my fingers and into those knuckles, and now I feel an awesome forearm stretch through that palmar fascia as well. So there's lots of different tips there for you. Give them a go, see how you get on.